Hello dear subscribers and watchers, this is me Said Al Yahya from Computer Science for Self-Taught. In today's video we are going to discuss about shared preferences. And for those of you guys who are hearing this word for the first time, shared preferences are the only mechanism and the simplest way to store your data in Android. It is an easy way to store your data in key value pair. You don't need to create the file, you don't need to use the APIs to store and retrieve the data. The only thing you need to do is you just need to put the data into it and get the data from it, and that's it. So the next question is what are shared preferences? Shared preferences, as you know, that it stores value based on the key value pairs. For example, these are your values. For example, this is your first name and this is your last name and this is your age. And if you want to store these values inside the shared preferences, you need to provide a tag for it, a tag or a key for it, and based on this tag or key you get this value from the shared preferences. So basically shared preferences are used to store data key value pairs like bundle in Android, and data is stored in XML file in a directory data package and shared preferences folder. As I've told you before, you don't need to worry about it. You just need to put the data into it and get the data from it, because the shared preferences itself is going to create an XML file and store your data on it. So basically shared preferences are meant to store data such as username, password, application settings and theme settings, and it is not meant to store table data in it like column data, and if you want to store primary key in the shared preferences. So shared preferences are not meant to store data tables, and to storing this kind of data you need to use SQLite for it. So basically shared preferences allows you to store primitive data types, booleans, floats, longs, integers and strings, and in the updated versions of shared preferences you can even store arrays of strings. So let's see what can be done with shared preferences further. So the next question is how to access them. So basically if you want to store all of your data in XML file, and you want to store all of them should be stored in one XML file, so then call the get preferences. So basically if you have one preference file, call the get preferences and provide the end mode for it, and the name of this preference will be the name of your package. And if you have several files, call the get shared preferences and provide the name for it and provide the end mode for it. So basically the mode means how you want to update and delete the data from it. So the first mode is mode private. It means that only your app can access the file. The next mode is mode world readable. It means all apps can read the file. And mode world writable means all apps can write to the file. And the next mode is mode multi-process. It means multiple processes can modify the same shared preferences. But the best important point I want you guys to remember is that these two, mode world readable and world writable, are deprecated as of now in KitKat version. So it is not recommended to use these modes in your shared preferences file. So the next question is how to use shared preferences. If it is the first time that user opens your app, so you can check it that if it is the first time that user opens this app, and you can ask some question from it. So the next user says app this. For example, check when your app was last updated. You can store the updated version and store the time and date into the preference file. So you can, the next usage of this shared preferences, you can check the credentials, remembering the user details. Whenever the user logins in the app and he provides his username and password, whenever it is stored inside the XML, when he opens the app again, so the app must not ask the user again and again to provide the username and password. You can use the shared preferences for this purpose. So the next usage is remembering the user settings. For example, I have a phone and I want this phone or this screen should be always in portrait mode, not in landscape mode. So you can also use the shared preference for this purpose also. And ultimately there is something called location caching, where you can get the user's last known position and store it inside a shared preferences file, so that the next time user comes inside your app, choose that last time you were at this location when you started the app. So now let's talk about how to store data using shared preferences. Very simple. To store the data, you need to get a reference from the shared preferences object. For a single file, you call the get preferences and provide a mode, and for several files you call the get shared preferences and provide the name and mode for it. So basically, when you want to store this John, you need to provide a key for it as the name of name. You store them inside the preferences. For storing the preferences, you need to call the class editor. So by using the editor, you can add the data with a key inside the shared preferences. And after you have added the data inside the shared preferences, you need to commit it by using the editor object, so the data can be saved inside the shared preferences. The next question is how to use the shared preferences. And if you want to get data from the shared preferences, you just need to provide the key. And based on the key that you provide to shared preferences, you can get your desirable value. To use the shared preferences to retrieve the data from it, you need to call the method get preferences and provide the mode. And basically it is used for a single file. If you have provided all of your data in a single file, and if you have stored all of your data in several files, you should call get shared preferences, provide the name of that file, and provide the mode for reading from that file, and use the key provided earlier to get the data. And you must provide the key to get the value, and supply the default value if the data is not found. We will discuss about it, how you can set the default value if you haven't set the data. Now it's time to do the practical in Android Studio, how to code for shared preferences, how to store the data in the shared preference, and how to retrieve the data from it. So now let's jump to it. Hello dear subscribers and watchers, welcome back to Computer Science for Self-Taught. Again, this is me Said Ali Yahya from Computer Science for Self-Taught. It is the continuation of our previous tutorial on shared preferences. If you jump to this video accidentally, make sure that you watch our previous video, which I have given extra explanation about shared preferences, so that you can grasp these codes that I'm explaining to you right now. So let's get started. So the first thing is that I've created an XML file, and I've created one text view as the name of username and one edit text, and another text view as the name of password, and another edit text as the name of password. I've created two buttons. When I click on the save buttons, the save button is going to store the user's entered data in the edit text box. When I click on the save button, it's going to get the data from these two edit text boxes and store them inside a shared preference file. And whenever I click on the go to button, it took me to another XML file, which is like this one. Okay, what is the functionality of this activity? There are also two buttons in here. One is load button and another is previous button. What are their functionalities? The first functionality of this button is when I click on the load button, it's going to get the data from the shared preferences and put them inside here in front of username, and put the username in front of the username, and put the password in front of the password. This is text view and this is also a text view. Okay, when I click on the load button, it's going to get the data from the shared preference and put those values inside these edit text boxes. When I click on the previous button, it took me back to our main activity. So how I can create this activity, so in here I'm going to shoot this for you. Okay, so you can see this. I'm scrolling down so that you can copy and paste these texts. So this is our text view. Okay, I've created another edit text as the name of edit text, and in here you can also put one thing as the name of max lines 5. Okay, and min lines 1. I put these two extra attributes in here because whenever the user writes his name in this edit text, whenever he clicks the enter, and he can click the enter up till 5 lines. Otherwise we will not, the edit text does not allow that user to write more than 5 lines, because in here I have determined that user cannot exceed from 5 lines. So the next one is also a text box, and another one is edit text, so you can copy and paste this code from the video and write inside your Android Studio, so for better understanding of this tutorial. And this is also a button, save button, and the button, go to button. Okay, so I hope copy and paste this tags from this activity. Let's go activity B. Again, same scenario. I've created two buttons and 4 edit text boxes like username and shoe name and password text view. So these are the XML tags, so you can copy and paste them. Let's go to activity B, activity main. Okay, which is this one, and this is the class of our main activity main. Okay, so as you can see, I've created two buttons. You can also see their IDs as the name btn save and btn go to. So I have created two btn button objects in here. One is btn save and another is btn go to. And you can see also I have created two edit text in here. Edit text 1, edit text 2. Okay, one is edit password and another one is edit text name. So I've created their respective objects in here, and now I'm going to initialize them. Okay, btn save and btn go to, edit name and edit password. And so in here I've created an object of onClick listener, and inside onClick method I have to determine which button is clicked. So in here you can see I have set their, I've registered them in the set onClick listener, and it requires an object of onClick listener. How your application knows which button is clicked. So in here I determine based on their IDs. By view, whenever you click on a button, it's going to get the ID of the clicked button. Okay, so the switch is going to get that value and compare to these cases. Okay, there are two cases. One is a case btn go to and case btn save. When I click on the go to button, it's going to get the ID of that button and compare to this one. If it was go to, it goes to go to method. So if I press control and bring the mouse and left click on it, it directs me to another method, which at first it throws a message go to next activity. And here I've created an intent. Okay, main activity dot this get me from main activity to activity B, and in here I pass an object of intent to start activity. Okay, whenever I click on the save button, it compares that. If it was the save button, so it's going to call the save button, which I have written the code in here. So in here, if you want to save your data inside a shared preference, make sure that you call the get shared preferences and set the name for it and also set mode for it. In here I set the mode as private, so only this app will be able to read and write the data from the shared preference file. And in here, if I want to add data to shared preferences do not have any add method or put a string or put data method, so that we can add data directly inside the shared preference. But we call another method as the name of edit method with shared preferences object, and it returns an editor object, and we need to insert that object inside an editor object, which I call with shared preference class. Okay, and in here I've created the editor object and stored that object which returns an editor object. I store it in an editor. By using this editor object, I call the put string method, which in this way you can put your data inside a shared preference. You have to provide a key, as I have discussed for you in our previous video, and put the value from it. Okay, so in here you must also commit the change. If you save your data inside the shared preferences, make sure that you call the commit method, and it returns a boolean value. If the data committed successfully in the shared preference, it's gonna return a true value, which it says the data saved successfully. And if the data didn't save successfully, so it returns a false value, which comes to the else, and it says unable to save the data inside the shared preference. So let's see what's left. So I don't see anything left in here. Okay, let's go to activity B, and again same scenario. You can see I've created two objects of text view. One is set name and set password, and two button load and button preview. I initialize these views inside the onCreate method, and again I use the same method for handling the event. Okay, when I click on the load button, it's going to call the load button. When I click on the button previous, it's going to take me to the previous method. You can see if I click load, it's going to get the data from the shared preference. How to get the data? On the main activity you learn that how to save the data inside the shared preference, but in activity B you learn how you can get the data from shared preference. So to do that, make sure that you also call the get shared preferences and write the name of that XML file which you have wrote in here. Okay, make sure that you don't provide mydata.txt because shared preferences store its data inside an XML file as the name of my data, and set the mode of that file. To get the data, you must call the get string by using the shared preference object. Make sure that you provide the key in here. If you can see, whenever I put the name inside the shared preference, I've already set a name or key for it. So with this name, I get this data from the shared preference. Okay, and in here it is a default value. So I'm not going to write in here. I'm going to create a global variable, public static final string default value. Okay, I'm going to copy and paste this. Okay, I'm going to eliminate this string from here and paste. sorry about this. Default value, Control C, Control V, Control V. Okay, get a string and I set the default value. So you must it's redundant if you write a string in here, okay, because it returns a string. You don't need to cast this in a string. And again it returns a string value, and make sure that you store them inside a string variable. And in here make sure that you check for the default value. If it returns the default value, which was this one, okay, I'm going to clear it. Default value, okay. If name and password was not equal to default value, then come in here, okay. Otherwise, if the default value was set, so I toss a message to the user. Make sure that you write toast.makeText main activity.this. I say please load the data. Sorry about this. Activity B. So let's run and see the output with your own eyes. Again, I'm going to scroll down so you can see the code, and copy and paste this inside your Android Studio. Make sure that you pause the video. When I click on the previous button, it's going to take me to the activity B. Make sure that you provide flags for it, because when I come to activity B, okay, when I load the data, if I want to go back to our main activity, make sure that you clear this activity, okay. But if you do not write this line of code in here, it's going to take you back in here. We will see that in practical, okay. Let's compile and run this. Again, I'm going to activity B. I'm going to scroll down so you can copy and paste the code from here. So okay, let's run and see the output. So this is our main activity, which is this one, okay, this activity, and this is its Java class. Okay, whenever I provide the username, like I'm going to put my name in here, here as her, password 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, okay. When I click on the save button, you can see I have handled the save button, okay. When I click on the save button, it's going to get the ID of this button and compares that ID with the case between goto. If it was goto was clicked, so it's going to take me to another activity. If the ID was equal to save, between save, so it's going to call the save button. So if I click on the save button, it's going to create a shared preference as the name of my data and store my username and password inside this my data. And if the saved was successfully inside the shared preference file, so it's coming here and returns a true value and toasts this message for me. Otherwise, it toasts me unable to save the data. Okay, let's see and see the output with your own eyes. You can see data saved successfully, which is this method called. And now if I click on the go to button, it's going to get in here, it's going to get the ID and compares to this case. If that ID was equals to between go to, so it's going to call the go to button, which is take me to another activity B, which is this one, okay, and it is the class of this activity. Now when I click on the go to button, let's see what happens. You can see go to next activity. So in here, whenever I click on the load button, it's going to get the ID and compares in here. If the load button was clicked, it's going to take me to the load button, and in here now we are going to get the data from the shared preference at the name of my data, okay. By using the shared preference object, I call the get string and provide the key that I've previously given for our username. If the username was empty and nothing was set for our name, so it's going to get the default value. So for the password as the same. If the name and password wasn't equal to the default value, it's going to set the name and password in here. Otherwise, it's going to call the please load data button. If I click on the load button, it's going to set the username and password in these text views. You can see Said Ali Yahya Azhar, and this is my password, and you can see data load successfully, which is called from in here. So whenever I click on the previous button, it's going to take that ID and compare to this one. So it's going to take me to this method, which is get me back to our main activity. If I didn't provide this line of code in here, you can see when I click on the back button, it's going to take me to this activity. You can see the magic of this line. Whenever I click the back button, it's going to end this activity or this application. If I didn't provide this line of code in here, again we are going to back to the same activity. And when I click the back button, and now the application will be end. You can see when I click the back button, the application ends successfully. If I comment this line of code, okay, let's rerun and see the magic. And this is where the magic happens. Okay, whenever I click on the go to button, so we are in this activity. Whenever I click the back button, and again if I click the back button, the app must end. So let's go to B and I load my name. Okay, when I go to the previous activity, this activity is not destroyed. Okay, when I click on the previous activity, okay, we are now in here. Whenever I click on the back button, we are still in this activity. And when I click the back button again, now this application gets me to our main activity. Now I can exit. If I uncomment this line of code, when I click on the previous button, okay, the app will finish. Go to B, okay, load previous. Now if I click on the back button, the app will finish. This is the magic of this line of code. You can see that there is no activity B. So this brings us to the end of this particular tutorial, and if you guys do like what you saw, make sure that you subscribe to our channel and make sure that you provide your thoughts in the comment boxes below this video, and don't forget to share these videos with your friends and support us in any way you can. So I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have fun learning. Peace out.